Hey there, Detective Souls. How's everyone doing today? Hope you're all keeping well and ready for something absolutely thrilling. Before we dive into today's mystery, I just want to take a moment, if you haven't already. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss an upload. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. So, grab your cup of tea or coffee, settle into your favorite chair, and dim the lights just a little. Because tonight, we're traveling back in time. To the year 1936. To the ancient, mysterious streets of Istanbul. To the legendary Pera Palace Hotel, where empires whispered secrets and shadows held darker truths. And of course, we're joining the one and only Hercule Poirot, the little Belgian detective with a magnificent moustache and those brilliant grey cells. A locked room. A murdered diplomat, an impossible crime, ancient symbols carved in flesh, and a conspiracy that stretches back 500 years. Are you ready? Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Midnight Telegram. The autumn rain of 1936 fell upon London like a mournful curtain, drumming against the window panes of Whitehaven mansions with relentless persistence. Inside his meticulously ordered flat, Hercule Poirot sat in his favorite armchair, the radiator warming his patent leather shoes while his grey cells remained delightfully unoccupied. It had been precisely 17 days since his last case, the unfortunate affair of the Countess and her missing emeralds, and the little Belgian detective found himself in that peculiar state of restlessness that only a man of superior intellect can truly understand. The mind, it must be exercised, Poirot murmured to himself, adjusting the antimacassar behind his head with precise fingers. Like the muscles of the body, no? His immaculate moustache twitched with dissatisfaction as he surveyed the evening newspaper. Politics, economics, the abdication crisis. Nothing to stimulate the little grey cells. The clock upon the mantelpiece struck 11, each chime measured and exact, just as Poirot preferred, when the sharp ring of the doorbell pierced the silence. His valet, the ever-reliable George, appeared moments later bearing a silver tray upon which rested a telegram. The yellow envelope seemed almost to vibrate with urgency. "This has just arrived, sir. The messenger insisted it was of the utmost importance." Poirot received the telegram with raised eyebrows. He noted the origin stamp, Constantinople, or as they now called it, Istanbul. His curiosity, already awakened, now burned with considerable intensity. He slit open the envelope with his silver letter opener and unfolded the message, "Poirot, stop, come immediately. Stop murder, most impossible, at Pera Palace Hotel. Stop locked room, stop victim found, with strange symbol carved upon chest. Stop British Embassy involved. Stop Delicate International, no matter stop will explain everything. Stop your old friend requires your genius. Stop Inspector Ahmed Osman." Poirot leaned back, his egg-shaped head tilting thoughtfully. Ahmed Osman. The name transported him back 15 years to a complicated case involving stolen antiquities and a murdered archaeologist in Cairo. The Egyptian inspector had been young then, ambitious, with a sharp mind that Poirot had admired greatly. "A locked room mystery," Poirot breathed, and his green eyes sparkled with sudden animation. "Magnifique." "Shall I begin packing, sir?" George inquired, demonstrating that remarkable ability of superior servants to anticipate their master's decisions. "Oui, George. Pack for 3 weeks. No, perhaps 1 month. Include the heavy overcoat. Istanbul in November, she will be cold and damp. And George?" "Sir." "My evening clothes. I suspect formal occasions shall present themselves." Within 36 hours, Hercule Poirot found himself aboard the legendary Orient Express, watching the European countryside slide past his compartment window like a painted panorama. The rhythmic clatter of wheels upon tracks created a hypnotic symphony as they crossed through the mountains of Yugoslavia. The dining car that evening presented the usual assortment of wealthy travelers. a Russian princess who had escaped the revolution with her jewels and her pride, a German industrialist with cold eyes and nervous hands, an English widow returning from visiting her married daughter in Paris, and a young American couple on their honeymoon, hopelessly in love and charmingly oblivious to the world around them. Poirot observed them all with professional interest while consuming his sole meunière with appropriate appreciation. One never knew when observation might prove valuable. It was the Russian princess, Madame Dobrovsky, she called herself, who first mentioned the Pera Palace. "You traveled to Istanbul, Monsieur Poirot?" she inquired, her accent thick as winter frost. "One hopes you do not stay at the Pera Palace Hotel. There has been—" She paused, lowering her voice dramatically. "An incident. Indeed, madame." Poirot's expression remained carefully neutral. "A man was killed in the most impossible circumstances, they say. The room was locked from within, the windows sealed shut, and upon his body—" She shuddered delicately. "The mark of the ancient ones was carved, the symbol of the Byzantine serpent. You are remarkably well informed, madame." Her eyes glittered like the diamonds at her throat. "I have my sources, monsieur. In my former life, information was currency more valuable than gold." The train lurched slightly as it navigated a curve, and for the briefest moment, Poirot glimpsed something in the princess's expression. Fear, perhaps, or guilt, or both, intertwined. "The ancient ones," Poirot repeated thoughtfully. "Tell me more about this Byzantine serpent, if you please." But Madame Dobrovsky had already risen from the table, gathering her furs about her thin shoulders. "Some knowledge, Monsieur Poirot, is dangerous to possess. I wish you safe travels." She departed, leaving behind only the lingering scent of expensive perfume and unanswered questions. Poirot smoothed his moustache contemplatively. The game, it seemed, had already begun. Chapter 2. The City of Shadows. The Orient Express pulled into Circeci station as the morning sun cast golden fingers across the ancient minarets of Istanbul. Steam hissed from the great locomotive like the breath of a slumbering dragon, and porters in red fezzes swarmed the platform with practiced efficiency. Hercule Poirot descended from his carriage with careful precision, his patent leather shoes meeting the worn stones of the platform with a satisfying click. The air here was different, heavy with the scent of roasting coffee, exotic spices, and the salt-tinged breath of the Bosphorus. "Mon Dieu," he murmured appreciatively. Constantinople. He could never bring himself to use the new name. Some things, Poirot believed, should remain as they were. A tall figure emerged from the crowd, a man of perhaps 45 years, with a thick black mustache and intelligent dark eyes that had seen much and forgotten little. He wore a well-tailored suit of European cut, though a traditional Turkish take sat upon his graying head. "Monsieur Poirot." Inspector Ahmed Osman extended his hand warmly. 15 years, and yet you have not aged a single day. What is your secret?" "Order, my friend. Method. And the careful attention to one's moustache." Poirot clasped the inspector's hand with genuine pleasure. "You, however, have aged most handsomely. The grey hair, it suits you." Ahmed laughed, but the sound was hollow, and shadows lurked beneath his eyes. "I fear this case has added many grey hairs in just 1 week. Come, my car awaits. I shall explain everything on the journey to the hotel." The automobile wound through the narrow streets of the old city, past crumbling Byzantine walls and Ottoman mosques that pierced the sky like stone prayers. Street vendors hawked their wares, carpets and copper pots, fresh simmet bread and fragrant tobacco. Donkeys laden with goods competed for space with modern motor cars, creating a chaotic symphony that was uniquely Istanbul. "The victim," Ahmed began, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, "was Sir Reginald Blackwood, British diplomat, 57 years of age. He arrived in Istanbul 3 weeks ago on what the embassy calls sensitive business. What that business was, they refused to tell me. The British, they do love their secrets, Poirot observed. On the night of October 28th, Sir Reginald retired to his suite at the Pera Palace, room 401, at precisely 10 o'clock. The night porter confirmed this. Sir Reginald requested that he not be disturbed under any circumstances and bolted his door from within. And the next morning? Ahmed's jaw tightened. When he failed to appear for a scheduled meeting, the hotel manager opened the door with a master key. But the chain bolt was still engaged. They had to break the door down, Poirot, and inside, he paused, navigating around a cart filled with melons before continuing. Inside, they found Sir Reginald dead upon the bed. His throat had been cut from ear to ear with surgical precision, and upon his bare chest, carved with the same blade, was a symbol, a serpent devouring its own tail, enclosed within a Byzantine cross. The Ouroboros, Poirot murmured thoughtfully. You know it. It is an ancient symbol, eternity, the endless cycle. But combined with the Byzantine cross, this is most peculiar. It speaks of something very old, something that perhaps should have remained buried. Ahmed nodded grimly. There is more. The windows of the room were locked from inside and sealed with paint that had not been disturbed in years. The walls are solid stone. No hidden passages. I have checked myself 3 times. There is no chimney. No ventilation shaft large enough for even a child to pass through. And yet someone entered, killed Sir Reginald, carved this symbol upon his chest, and departed like a ghost. Poirot's grey cells were now fully awakened. What of suspects? This is where politics make everything complicated. The car emerged from a narrow alley, and suddenly the magnificent facade of the Pera Palace Hotel rose before them. 6 stories of European elegance transplanted into the heart of the Orient, its ornate balconies and grand entrance spoke of an age when Istanbul was the crossroads of empires. The night Sir Reginald died, Ahmed continued, parking the automobile, there were 5 persons of interest staying on the 4th floor, a Greek shipping magnate named Dimitrios Andropoulos, who had public disputes with Sir Reginald over trade agreements. A French archaeologist, Professor Henri Beaumont, who claims to be searching for Byzantine relics. An Austrian countess, Elise von Hartmann, whose late husband had questionable connections to certain political movements. 3 suspects. You mentioned 5. Ahmed hesitated. The 4th is delicate. Prince Mustafa Karim, cousin to the former Ottoman Sultan. He lives in exile, but retains considerable influence. And the 5th, yes, Lady Cordelia Blackwood, the victim's wife. Poirot raised an eyebrow. The wife was staying in the same hotel while her husband was murdered in a locked room. Separate suites, separate floors. Their marriage, from what I gather, existed only on paper. There are rumors of a substantial insurance policy and a young lover waiting in London. The detective stepped out of the car, surveying the grand hotel entrance where doormen in gilded uniforms stood at attention. Somewhere within those elegant walls, a murderer walked freely. A murderer who could apparently pass through solid walls like smoke. This Prince Mustafa, Poirot said slowly. What was his connection to Sir Reginald? Ahmed lowered his voice. That is the most troubling part, my friend. 20 years ago, before the fall of the empire, Sir Reginald served in the British embassy here, and during that time, 5 young men, all connected to the Sultan's court, disappeared without trace. Prince Mustafa was meant to be the 6th, but he fled to Paris before what? Before he could suffer the same fate, and now, after all these years, he has returned, 1 week before Sir Reginald was murdered. A cold wind blew from the Bosphorus, carrying with it the cry of seagulls and the faint echo of the call to prayer from a distant mosque. Poirot smoothed his moustache with deliberate care. This is not simply murder, Ahmed. This is revenge served cold as the grave itself. Show me the room where Sir Reginald died. Hercule Poirot would examine every centimetre. As they entered the grand lobby of the Pera Palace, Poirot could not shake the feeling that unseen eyes watched their every move. The ghosts of the Ottoman Empire were stirring, and somewhere in this city of shadows, a killer waited. The game was becoming most interesting indeed. Chapter 3. The Room of Death. The grand lobby of the Pera Palace Hotel was a cathedral of European elegance, marble columns rising towards ornate ceilings painted with cherubs and clouds. Crystal chandeliers casting diamond light upon velvet furnishings, and the soft murmur of wealthy guests conducting conversations in a dozen different languages. Yet beneath this veneer of civilized luxury, Poirot sensed tension. The staff moved with nervous efficiency. Guests spoke in hushed whispers, their eyes darting toward the grand staircase as though expecting death himself to descend. The hotel manager, a thin Greek gentleman named Stavros Papadopoulos, greeted them with visible relief. His hands trembled slightly as he produced a heavy iron key. "Inspector Osman, Monsieur Poirot, thank heaven you have come. This terrible business is destroying my hotel. Guests are cancelling reservations. The newspapers speak of curses and Byzantine ghosts. If this matter is not resolved quickly." He left the sentence unfinished, but his meaning was clear. "The room has remained undisturbed since the body was removed?" Poirot inquired. "Exactly as you instructed, Inspector. No one has entered. I have posted a guard at the door day and night." They ascended in the hotel's celebrated lift, the first electric elevator in Istanbul. Papadopoulos informed them with a flash of professional pride that seemed almost absurd given the circumstances. The brass cage rose smoothly, and Poirot observed the floor numbers with thoughtful attention. The fourth-floor corridor stretched before them, its Turkish carpets muffling their footsteps, its gas lamps casting pools of amber light that left shadows lurking in corners. Room 401 waited at the corridor's end, its door still bearing the scars of forced entry. A young police officer snapped to attention as they approached. "Merhaba, Inspector." Ahmed dismissed him with a nod, then turned to Poirot. "Are you ready, my friend?" "The little grey cells. They are always ready." The door swung open with a groan of damaged hinges. Hercule Poirot stood upon the threshold, permitting his senses to absorb the room before his feet disturbed its secrets. The suite was handsome, high ceilings with decorative moldings, walls papered in deep burgundy silk, heavy mahogany furniture that spoke of Victorian solidity. The great bed dominated the space, its white linen still stained with the rusty evidence of violence. "Mon Dieu," Poirot breathed softly. Then he stepped inside. His movements were methodical, precise. The movements of a man who understood that chaos was the enemy of truth. He began at the door itself, examining the lock, the chain bolt, the hinges. "The chain," he murmured. "It was indeed engaged when you arrived." "Absolutely," Ahmed confirmed. "I was the first police officer on the scene. The chain was stretched tight. We had to break the bracket from the wall to enter." Poirot produced a small magnifying glass from his waistcoat pocket and examined the bracket with intense concentration. The wood around the screws was freshly splintered, consistent with forced entry. No signs of tampering. He moved next to the windows, two grand casements overlooking the street below. The latches were secured, and indeed, as Ahmed had reported, old paint sealed the frames. Poirot ran his finger along the seal. "This paint has not been disturbed in years," he confirmed. "No one exited through these windows." The walls received similar attention. Poirot knocked upon them systematically, listening for hollow sounds that might indicate hidden passages. He examined the skirting boards, the ornate fireplace that had been bricked up decades ago, even the ceiling with its decorative plasterwork. Nothing. "It is as I told you," Ahmed said quietly. Impossible. Nothing is impossible, my friend, only unexplained. Finally, Poirot approached the bed. The chalk outline of Sir Reginald's body remained upon the stained mattress, a ghostly silhouette of death. Poirot studied it carefully, noting the position of the arms, the angle of the head. He was lying peacefully, Poirot observed. There is no indication of struggle, no defensive wounds, I assume. None. The medical examiner believes he was killed in his sleep. A man who requests not to be disturbed, who bolts his door with chain and lock, who perhaps fears for his safety. And yet he sleeps so soundly that his throat is cut without resistance. Poirot shook his head slowly. He was drugged. There can be no other explanation. The autopsy revealed traces of chloral hydrate in his stomach. But how was it administered? Room service records show no food or drink delivered to this room that evening. Poirot's eyes swept the bedside table. A water carafe stood there, still half full, a drinking glass beside it. This water, it has been tested. Pure. No traces of any substance. And yet there is a second glass. Poirot pointed to the washstand across the room, where indeed another drinking glass sat beside the porcelain basin. Why would a man alone require 2 glasses? Ahmed frowned. Perhaps one was already in the room when he arrived. Perhaps. But Poirot's tone suggested he thought otherwise. He bent low, his magnifying glass hovering over the carpet near the bed. For several long moments he remained motionless, then suddenly produced a small envelope from his pocket and carefully collected something invisible to the untrained eye. "What have you found?" Ahmed asked eagerly. "Sand," Poirot replied thoughtfully. "Fine particles of sand, here beside the bed where the killer must have stood. And something else." He moved to the window, holding a small fragment up to the light. It was a thread, deep crimson in color, almost black. "Silk," he announced. "Of very fine quality. The color, it is distinctive. This thread did not come from the curtains or the bedclothes." Ahmed examined the fragment with puzzlement. A clue to the killer's identity? Perhaps, or perhaps a clue deliberately left to mislead. Poirot straightened, his expression grave. "Tell me, Ahmed, this symbol carved upon Sir Reginald's chest, do you have photographs?" Ahmed produced a folder from his briefcase. Inside were several police photographs, stark and terrible in their clarity. Poirot studied them with clinical detachment. The symbol was indeed the Ouroboros, the serpent consuming its own tail, but rendered in a style that was distinctly Byzantine. At its center, forming the serpent's eye, was a small cross with flared ends. "This is not mere decoration," Poirot declared. "This is a message, a signature. Someone wishes the world to know that this killing was an act of ancient justice." "The Byzantine serpent," Ahmed said slowly. "According to legend, it was the symbol of a secret society within the Sultan's court, protectors of sacred relics and ancient knowledge. They were destroyed during the fall of Constantinople in 1453, or so history teaches. History teaches many things that are not entirely accurate." Poirot returned the photographs and made one final circuit of the room. "There is one more thing that troubles me greatly." "What is that?" Poirot pointed to the floor near the door. "Observe the pattern of the carpet. The pile runs in one direction, as is natural, but here, near the entrance, the pile is disturbed in 2 directions, towards the door and away from it." "Someone walked in and out. That is hardly surprising." "But the disturbance extends beneath the door, my friend. A small detail, easily overlooked. Someone, or something, passed under this door while the chain was still engaged." Ahmed stared. "That is impossible. The gap beneath the door is barely 2 centimeters. Poirot smiled grimly. "And yet the evidence suggests otherwise. We are dealing with the most ingenious killer, Ahmed. One who understands that the impossible, when eliminated of all alternatives, must be the truth." He strode towards the door, pausing at the threshold. I must interview the suspects, beginning with the one who interests me most. Prince Mustafa? No. Poirot's eyes glittered with sudden intensity. Lady Cordelia Blackwood, the grieving widow who sleeps one floor below while her husband is murdered above. In my experience, the spouse is always the first person one must eliminate from suspicion, or confirm it. He stepped into the corridor, leaving behind the room of death with its impossible secrets. But as they walked away, neither man noticed the figure watching from a doorway further down the hall. A figure in a dark cloak that withdrew into shadow like a serpent returning to its lair. Chapter 4. The Widow's Web Lady. Cordelia Blackwood received them in her suite on the 3rd floor. A room smaller than her late husband's, but decorated with equal elegance. She sat upon a chaise longue near the window, dressed in mourning black that accentuated her porcelain complexion and hair the color of autumn wheat. She was beautiful. Poirot noted this immediately. Perhaps 35 years of age, with eyes of pale gray that held intelligence and something else. Something guarded and calculating that lurked beneath her performance of grief. And it was a performance. Poirot was certain of this within the first 30 seconds. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying the refined tones of English aristocracy, "forgive me if I do not rise. This terrible tragedy has left me quite devastated." Her handkerchief, Poirot observed, was perfectly dry. Her eyes showed no evidence of recent tears, and upon the table beside her sat a half-eaten plate of Turkish delights and a novel. French, romantic, hardly the reading material of a woman consumed by mourning. "Please accept my deepest condolences, Lady Blackwood," Poirot said, settling into the chair she indicated. "I am Hercule Poirot. I have been asked to assist Inspector Osman in this most difficult investigation." "Poirot." Her eyes flickered with recognition. "The detective. I've read about you in the London papers. That affair with the Orient Express, was it not?" "Madame is well informed." "I make it my business to be informed, Monsieur Poirot. Knowledge is the only true currency in this world." She arranged her skirts with practiced grace. "Ask your questions. I have nothing to hide." Poirot smiled, the smile of a cat observing a mouse who believes itself clever. "You were married to Sir Reginald for how long, madame?" 12 years, though married is perhaps too generous a word for what we had become. "You were estranged." "We maintained separate residences in London, separate lives, separate—" She paused delicately. "Interests. Our marriage was an arrangement, Monsieur Poirot. My family possessed a title, but no fortune. Reginald possessed fortune, but craved social position. A common enough transaction among our class. And yet you traveled together to Istanbul. Coincidence, I assure you. Reginald was here on diplomatic business. I came to visit a dear friend, Countess von Hartmann, who has a suite on this very floor. I had no idea my husband would be staying at the same hotel until I encountered him in the lobby 3 days after my arrival." Ahmed leaned forward. "And your relationship during this unexpected reunion?" Lady Blackwood's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. "Civil, distant. We dined together once, maintained the appearance of cordiality. Reginald was always conscious of appearances. On the night of his death," Poirot said softly. "Where were you, madame?" "Here, in my suite. I retired at 9 o'clock with a headache and did not emerge until morning, when Inspector Osman's men came knocking with their dreadful news. And there is someone who can verify this. A maid, perhaps." For the first time, something flickered in those gray eyes. Uncertainty. Fear. "I dismissed my maid for the evening. I wished to be alone. So you have no alibi for the hours during which your husband was murdered." Lady Blackwood rose suddenly, moving to the window with graceful agitation. The light from the Bosphorus illuminated her profile. Sharp, beautiful, dangerous. "Let us dispense with pretense, Monsieur Poirot. I know what you are thinking. The unhappy wife, the substantial inheritance, the convenient locked room that makes my involvement seem impossible. You suspect me. I suspect everyone, madame. It is my profession. She turned to face him, and now her mask had slipped. Behind it was not grief, but anger. Cold, controlled, ancient anger. I did not love my husband. I freely admit this. He was a cruel man, Monsieur Poirot. A man who enjoyed the suffering of others, but I did not kill him. I'm not fool enough to commit murder in a hotel where I am registered under my own name, with 100 witnesses who can place me at the scene. Many murderers have been precisely that foolish. I am not many murderers. She returned to her seat, composing herself with visible effort. Besides, there are others with far greater reason to wish Reginald dead. Have you spoken with Prince Mustafa or the Greek Andropolis? Ask them about the events of 1916. Ask them about the 5 martyrs. Poirot's ears pricked with interest. The 5 martyrs? Lady Blackwood's smile was knowing. So Ahmed has not told you everything. How interesting. She glanced at the inspector, who had grown suddenly pale. 20 years ago, 5 young men connected to the Ottoman court vanished without trace. All of them had been observed meeting with British intelligence officers. All of them were suspected of passing secrets to the Allies, and all of them were last seen entering a certain house in the old city. A house where your husband, Inspector Osman, conducted interrogations on behalf of the Sultan's secret police. Ahmed's face had become a mask of stone. That was a different time, a different world. Was it? And yet here we are. The son of a man who helped make 5 young men disappear, investigating the murder of the British agent who selected them for elimination. How deliciously circular. Poirot raised his hand gently. These are grave accusations, madame. You claim Sir Reginald was responsible for these disappearances. Responsible. He was proud of it. In his cups, which was frequently, he would boast of his service to the crown during the war years. He called them traitors. He said they deserved what they received. And Prince Mustafa was to be the 6th victim? Yes, but someone warned him. He fled to Paris mere hours before Reginald's men came for him. Lady Blackwood leaned forward, her eyes glittering. For 20 years, Mustafa has lived in exile, waiting, planning, and now he has returned to Istanbul at the precise moment when Reginald appears. You wish to find your murderer? Look no further than the 4th floor, Monsieur Poirot. Room 408. She settled back into her chair, clearly pleased with herself. But Poirot was not yet finished. You mentioned a dear friend, Madame Countess von Hartmann. How long have you known this lady? Something shifted in Lady Blackwood's expression. The faintest hesitation before she answered. We met in Vienna before the war. We have corresponded ever since. And her late husband, the Count, what were these questionable connections of which Inspector Osman spoke? Lady Blackwood rose abruptly. I believe this interview is concluded, Monsieur Poirot. I've told you everything I know. If you have further questions, you may address them to my solicitor. One final question, madame. Poirot remained seated, his voice gentle but inexorable. This silk thread, crimson of very fine quality, do you recognize it? He produced the fragment from his pocket, holding it up to the light. Lady Blackwood's face became perfectly still. I do not. It is curious. The color, it is most unusual, almost the exact shade of the gown you wore to dinner on the night of your husband's death. I observed this gown hanging in your wardrobe as we entered. The door was slightly open, you understand? Lady Blackwood's hand moved involuntarily to her throat. Many women own red gowns, monsieur. Indeed, but few own gowns of this particular Byzantine silk. Imported from a monastery in Greece, if I am not mistaken. Very rare, very expensive, the kind of silk one might purchase from a specialty dealer in the Grand Bazaar. The widow's composure cracked just for an instant. Fear flickered in her eyes. Raw and genuine. I think you should leave now, Monsieur Poirot. Of course, madame. Poirot rose, tucking the thread carefully back into his pocket. But before I go, a word of advice, if you will permit. You are not the only spider in this web, and the strand upon which you sit may be more fragile than you realize. He bowed with old-world courtesy and departed, leaving Lady Cordelia Blackwood standing alone by the window, her pale face troubled with shadows. In the corridor, Ahmed gripped Poirot's arm. "That was masterful," he breathed. "She knows something. She is protecting someone. Or she is protecting herself." Poirot smoothed his moustache thoughtfully. "The thread troubles me, Ahmed. It is too convenient, too easily found. A clever murderer would not leave such evidence, unless they wished it to be discovered. You think it was planted? I think nothing yet. But I observe, I question, I allow the little grey cells to work." He paused, his expression darkening. "There is something else that troubles me more greatly." "What is that?" "Lady Blackwood's revelation about your father. You did not tell me of his involvement in these events of 1916. Ahmed looked away, his jaw tight. "My father died believing he served justice. He was a loyal servant of the Sultan. He did what was required of him. And you? What do you believe?" Silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. "I believe," Ahmed said finally, "that the sins of fathers should not be visited upon their sons. But I also believe that the dead demand justice, regardless of how many years have passed." Poirot nodded slowly. "Then we understand each other. But I must ask, is your investigation of this case entirely objective? Or do you seek to bury the truth along with Sir Reginald?" The inspector met his gaze steadily. "I seek only the truth, Poirot, whatever that truth may reveal, even about my own family." "Bien." Poirot clasped his friend's shoulder. "Then let us continue. I wish to meet this Prince Mustafa, a man who has waited 20 years for revenge. Such a man will have much to tell us." They walked towards the staircase, unaware that behind them a door had opened silently. Countess Elise von Hartmann watched them depart, her elegant face betraying nothing, her gloved hand clutching a telegram that bore a single word: "Proceed." Chapter 5. The Prince's Confession. The afternoon call to prayer echoed across Istanbul as Poirot and Ahmed climbed the stairs to the 4th floor. The haunting melody drifted through the hotel's ancient walls, a reminder that beneath the European veneer, this city belonged to the East, mysterious, ancient, and unforgiving. Room 408 stood at the opposite end of the corridor from the death chamber. Poirot noted this with interest. The distance was perhaps 40 meters, close enough to observe, or far enough to claim ignorance. Ahmed knocked firmly. "Prince Mustafa, it is Inspector Osman. I must speak with you regarding the investigation." Silence. Then, slowly, the door opened. The man who stood before them was not what Poirot had expected. He had imagined Ottoman royalty to be corpulent, decadent, draped in silks and jewels. Instead, Prince Mustafa Karim was lean as a blade, with silver hair cropped short in the European fashion, and eyes black as the waters of the Bosphorus at midnight. He wore a simple grey suit, impeccably tailored, and his only ornament was a silver ring bearing an ancient seal. Those dark eyes surveyed Poirot with immediate recognition. "The famous detective," he said, his English perfect, his accent carrying traces of Paris and Vienna. "I wondered when you would come. Please, enter. I have been expecting this conversation for 20 years." The prince's suite was spare, almost monastic. No photographs adorned the walls, no personal treasures cluttered the surfaces. Only books, hundreds of them, stacked on every available surface. History, philosophy, poetry. And in one corner, a small prayer rug facing east. "Forgive the disorder," Mustafa said, gesturing towards 2 chairs. "I have spent my exile accumulating knowledge. It is all I have left of my former life." "Your Highness is most gracious to receive us," Poirot said, settling into the offered seat. "Highness," the prince smiled bitterly. "A title without meaning. The empire is dust, the sultanate abolished. I'm simply an old man with memories and regrets." He sat across from them, his posture elegant despite his years. "Ask your questions, Monsieur Poirot. I shall answer truthfully." "You knew Sir Reginald Blackwood." "I knew what he was. A jackal in diplomat's clothing. A man who traded in human lives as others trade in silk or spices." The prince's voice remained calm, but his hands trembled slightly. 20 years ago, he destroyed everything I loved. "The 5 martyrs," Poirot said softly. Mustafa closed his eyes. For a long moment, he did not speak. When he opened them again, they glistened with unshed tears. "They were my friends, my brothers in spirit. Kemal, the poet, Osman, the scholar, Yusuf, the musician, Ibrahim, the painter, and Selim." His voice caught. "Selim was to marry my sister. They were young, idealistic. They believed that the Ottoman Empire could be reformed from within, that progress and tradition could coexist. They were passing information to the British," Ahmed said quietly. "They were trying to prevent a catastrophe." Mustafa's calm shattered momentarily. "The Sultan's advisors were leading the empire towards destruction. My friends believed that if the British understood our internal situation, they might help broker a peace. They were not traitors. They were patriots who saw further than their masters." "And Sir Reginald?" The prince's expression hardened to stone. "Blackwood was the British contact. He encouraged them, cultivated them, drew them deeper into his web with promises of support and protection. And then, when he had extracted every useful piece of information, he betrayed them to the Sultan's secret police." Ahmed shifted uncomfortably. "The interrogations?" "Were conducted by your father, Inspector. Yes, I know who you are. I've always known." Mustafa's gaze was steady, without accusation. "Your father was a tool, an instrument. The guilt belongs to the hand that wielded him, and that hand belonged to Reginald Blackwood." Poirot leaned forward. "What happened to your friends, Your Highness?" "They were taken to a house in the old city. They were questioned, and then they vanished. No bodies were ever found. No graves marked. They simply ceased to exist, as though they had never lived at all." The prince's voice fell to a whisper. "I was to be next, but I received a warning. A note pushed under my door in the middle of the night. I fled that very hour, with nothing but the clothes on my back and my grandmother's ring." "Who sent this warning?" "I never knew. The note was unsigned. For 20 years, I've wondered who saved my life, and why." Poirot studied the prince carefully. Here was a man with profound motive, a man who had nursed his hatred for 2 decades, a man who had returned to Istanbul at precisely the moment when his enemy appeared. "Your Highness, I must ask directly, did you kill Sir Reginald Blackwood?" Mustafa met his gaze without flinching. "I wanted to. Every night for 20 years, I dreamed of watching the life drain from his eyes. I imagined 1,000 different deaths for him, each more painful than the last." "That is not an answer." "No, I did not kill him." The prince rose and walked to the window, looking out at the city of his birth. "When I learned that Blackwood was in Istanbul, I came here intending to confront him, to demand answers, to force him to acknowledge what he had done. But murder—" He shook his head slowly. "I've spent 20 years studying the teachings of the Sufis, Monsieur Poirot. I've learned that revenge is a poison that destroys the vessel that contains it. I wanted justice, not blood. And yet Sir Reginald is dead, and the symbol carved upon his chest, the Byzantine serpent, is known to you, is it not?" Mustafa turned sharply. "The serpent? That is not possible. You recognize it. Every Ottoman prince knows the legend. The Brotherhood of the Byzantine Serpent was a secret society founded after the fall of Constantinople. They swore to protect the sacred relics of Byzantium and to punish those who desecrated them. But they were destroyed centuries ago. They are myth, history. Myth does not carve symbols upon murdered men. The prince sank back into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his years. Then someone is using the old symbols for their own purposes. Someone who wishes to make this killing appear as an act of ancient vengeance. Or, Poirot suggested quietly, someone who belongs to a brotherhood that never truly died. Mustafa's dark eyes widened. You cannot be suggesting. I suggest nothing. I merely observe possibilities. Poirot rose, pacing the small room. Tell me, Your Highness. On the night of the murder, where were you? Here, in this room. Reading. And witnesses? I am a solitary man, Monsieur Poirot. I spoke to no one. I ordered no room service. I am afraid my alibi is as empty as Lady Blackwood's. You know the lady? I know of her. She visited my suite 2 days before the murder. She wished to discuss her husband, his past, his crimes. She seemed to be gathering information. Poirot stopped mid-pace. Lady Blackwood came to you? For what purpose? She claimed to be writing a memoir. She said she wished to expose her husband's wartime activities, but I sensed another motive beneath her questions. She wanted to know who else might wish Blackwood dead. She was compiling a list of suspects. Or a list of potential allies, Ahmed murmured. Indeed. Mustafa nodded slowly. I told her nothing of value. I do not trust the English. Even those who claim to seek truth often merely seek advantage. Poirot resumed his seat, his grey cells working furiously. Your Highness, I must ask about the other guests on this floor, the Greek Andropolis, the French archaeologist Beaumont, the Countess von Hartmann. Do you know any of them? Something flickered in the prince's eyes at the last name. It was brief, barely perceptible. But Poirot noticed. The Greek I know by reputation, a vulgar man who has grown wealthy from the misfortunes of others. The Frenchman I have not met. But the Countess? Yes? Mustafa hesitated. The Countess von Hartmann is not who she claims to be. Ahmed leaned forward eagerly. Explain. Her late husband, Count Friedrich von Hartmann, was indeed Austrian nobility. He was also a collector of Byzantine antiquities, relics stolen from churches and monasteries across the former empire. Many of these treasures were sacred to my people. The Count acquired them through bribery, theft, and occasionally murder. And the Countess was complicit in these crimes. More than complicit. According to my sources, she was the architect. The Count was merely the face of the operation. His wife was the mind. Poirot stroked his mustache thoughtfully. You say she is not who she claims to be. What do you mean? The prince lowered his voice. Elise von Hartmann is not Austrian. She was born in Constantinople, a Greek Orthodox family with connections to the old Byzantine aristocracy. Her true name is Elena Vasilikos, and her grandfather was the last known Grand Master of the Brotherhood of the Byzantine Serpent. The revelation hung in the air like incense smoke. Mon Dieu, Poirot breathed. Then the Countess. May be the very serpent you seek, Monsieur Poirot. Mustafa's expression was grave. But be warned, if the Brotherhood has truly survived, they are masters of deception. They have hidden in plain sight for 500 years. They do not leave witnesses. A knock at the door shattered the tension. Ahmed opened it to reveal a young police officer, breathless with urgency. Inspector, there has been another incident. The Greek Andropolis has been attacked in his room. He's alive, but barely conscious. And upon the wall, written in his own blood. What? Ahmed demanded. What was written? The officer swallowed hard. A single word, sir. 2. Poirot rose swiftly, his face grim. The The killer announces his second victim, but Sir Reginald was the first. That means... It means the killer is not finished, Ahmed completed. There will be more deaths. They rushed towards the door, but Poirot paused on the threshold. Turning back to the prince, "Your Highness, do not leave this hotel. You may be in grave danger." Mustapha smiled sadly. "I have lived in danger for 20 years, Monsieur Poirot. A few more days will make little difference." As they hurried down the corridor towards Andropolis's room, Poirot's mind raced. The pattern was becoming clearer, but also more terrifying. This was not a single murder. This was a systematic execution. And somewhere in this hotel of shadows, a killer waited to strike again. The Byzantine serpent was awakening. Chapter 6. Blood upon the walls. The corridor outside Demetrios Andropolis's suite was chaos. Hotel staff clustered in frightened groups, whispering in Turkish and Greek. 2 police officers stood guard at the shattered door, their faces pale beneath their official composure. Poirot pushed through the crowd with surprising authority for a man of his stature. Ahmed followed close behind, barking orders that scattered the onlookers like startled pigeons. The scene inside room 415 was one of violent struggle. Unlike Sir Reginald's pristine death chamber, this room told a story of desperate combat. Furniture lay overturned, chairs splintered, a mahogany table cracked in half. Shattered glass from a broken mirror carpeted the floor like crystalline snow. Blood spattered the walls in arterial patterns that spoke of terrible wounds. And there, scrawled above the fireplace in letters 2 feet high, was the message. 2. The blood was still wet, glistening in the afternoon light like dark rubies. Demetrios Andropolis lay upon the floor near the window, attended by a Turkish doctor who worked with frantic efficiency. The Greek was a large man, corpulent, with the soft hands of one who had never performed physical labor. His expensive silk pajamas were soaked crimson, and his throat bore a wound that had narrowly missed the jugular. "He will live," the doctor announced, not looking up from his work. "The blade missed the artery by millimeters. A few stitches deeper, and we would be preparing a coffin." "Can he speak?" Ahmed demanded. "Not yet. He has lost much blood. Perhaps in a few hours, if Allah wills it." Poirot approached the wounded man carefully, studying his injuries with clinical detachment. The throat wound was the most serious, but there were others. Defensive cuts on both palms, a deep gash across the left shoulder, a puncture wound in the thigh. "He fought," Poirot observed. Unlike Sir Reginald, who died peacefully in his sleep, Monsieur Andropolis was awake and aware. He struggled against his attacker. "Which means he may have seen the killer's face," Ahmed said eagerly. "Indeed, that is why he was left alive. A warning, or perhaps a message." Poirot straightened, his eyes sweeping the devastated room. The killer could have finished his work. The throat wound was precise, surgical. The mark of someone who knows exactly how to kill, yet they chose mercy. Why? He moved towards the bloody message on the wall, careful to avoid the glass shards beneath his feet. 2, he murmured. Not the second or number 2. Simply 2. What does this signify? Ahmed joined him, studying the gruesome calligraphy. Perhaps the killer is counting. Sir Reginald was the first, Andropolis was meant to be the second. But he lives. So the count remains incomplete. Poirot shook his head slowly. No, I believe this number has another meaning. 2 refers not to the sequence of victims, but to something else entirely. A code, a reference. To what? That, my friend, is what we must discover. Poirot turned his attention to the struggle's evidence. He knelt beside the overturned table, examining the splinters with his magnifying glass. Near one leg, half hidden beneath a torn curtain, something glinted. "Tiens," he breathed, carefully extracting the object with his handkerchief. It was a button, Small, golden, engraved with an intricate design, a serpent coiled around a Byzantine cross. "The same symbol," Ahmed said, peering over Poirot's shoulder. The killer left evidence, or the victim tore it from his attacker during the struggle. Poirot examined the button closely. "This is not merely decorative. It is a badge of membership. Whoever wore this belongs to the Brotherhood of the Byzantine Serpent." Then Prince Mustafa was telling the truth. The Brotherhood exists. It appears so, but we must ask ourselves, is the killer a member of this Brotherhood, or is someone using their symbols to mislead us? Poirot pocketed the button carefully. What do we know of Andropolis? Why would he be targeted? Ahmed consulted a small notebook. Dimitrios Andropolis, 62 years old, Greek shipping magnate based in Athens, made his fortune during the Great War, transporting supplies for various governments. His methods were not always ethical. He profited from conflict enormously. There are rumors that he also dealt in stolen antiquities, Byzantine treasures looted from churches during the chaos of war. He and Sir Reginald had public disputes over trade agreements, but privately they were connected by darker business. Poirot completed the thought. The trafficking of sacred relics. If the Brotherhood of the Byzantine Serpent truly exists to protect such treasures, then Andropolis would be a natural target. A commotion at the door interrupted their discussion. Countess Elise von Hartmann swept into the room, her elegant face a mask of concern. She wore a gown of deep purple, and her silver hair was arranged in an elaborate style that must have taken hours to achieve. "Dear God," she exclaimed, her German accent pronounced. "Is it true? Has there been another attack?" Ahmed stepped forward to intercept her. "Countess, this is a crime scene. You should not be here." "But Dimitrios is my friend. We were to dine together this evening. When I heard the commotion—" She pressed a gloved hand to her breast, the picture of aristocratic distress. Will he survive?" "He will live," Ahmed assured her, guiding her firmly toward the door. "But I must ask you to wait in your suite. We will have questions for you shortly." The Countess's eyes swept the room, lingering momentarily on the bloody message upon the wall. Something flickered in her gaze. Recognition, satisfaction, before her mask of concern returned. "Of course, Inspector. I shall be in my rooms. Please find whoever is responsible for these horrors." She departed with a rustle of silk, leaving behind the faint scent of jasmine perfume. Poirot watched her go with narrowed eyes. "That woman," he said softly, "is not surprised. She performs distress, but her eyes are cold, calculating. You suspect her. I suspect everyone. But the Countess troubles me greatly. According to Prince Mustafa, she is not Austrian but Greek, a descendant of Byzantine aristocracy, and her grandfather was connected to the very Brotherhood whose symbol now adorns murdered men." Ahmed lowered his voice. "Should we arrest her? On what grounds? We have no evidence, only suspicion and coincidence. No, we must proceed carefully. The Countess is dangerous, but she is also proud. Pride leads to mistakes." A weak groan drew their attention back to the wounded man. Andropolis was stirring, his eyes fluttering open. The doctor immediately began administering water, speaking soothingly in Greek. Poirot approached swiftly, kneeling beside the injured man. "Monsieur Andropolis, can you hear me? I'm Hercule Poirot. I'm trying to find who did this to you." The Greek's eyes focused with difficulty. His lips moved, forming words that emerged as barely audible whispers. "Woman, sir, a woman attacked you." Poirot leaned closer. "Who? Did you see her face?" Andropolis's hand gripped Poirot's wrist with surprising strength. His eyes were wild with terror. "Not woman, worse, like shadow, like death itself. Please, monsieur, any detail might help us catch this person." "Eyes," Andropolis gasped. "So, eyes blue, cold, like ice on Bosphorus. His grip loosened and his head fell back. The doctor immediately checked his pulse. He has fainted. The strain was too much. He will not wake again for many hours. Poirot rose slowly, his expression troubled. Blue eyes, he murmured. Like ice. Ahmed frowned. Lady Blackwood has grey eyes. The Countess, brown. Prince Mustafa, black. Professor Beaumont has eyes of brown also. I observed this in the dining room yesterday evening. Then who among our suspects has blue eyes? Poirot did not answer. He was staring at the bloody message on the wall, his grey cells working at furious speed. 2, he said suddenly. Ahmed, what if this number refers not to victims, but to a date, a year? A year. 2, 1902? No. Think biblically. 2, the second. The Second Council of Constantinople was held in the year 553. But more significantly, Poirot's eyes widened. The Second Crusade began in 1147, and the Second Byzantine Serpent Purge, when the Brotherhood was supposedly destroyed, occurred in 1452, Ahmed breathed, 1 year before the fall of Constantinople. Precisely. The killer is sending a message about history, about justice delayed for centuries. Poirot began pacing rapidly. We are not dealing with simple murder, Ahmed. We are dealing with a crusade, a holy war against those who have desecrated Byzantine legacy. But surely such fanaticism cannot exist in the modern age. Fanaticism exists in every age, my friend. It merely changes its costume. Poirot stopped abruptly at the window. There is something we have overlooked, a connection we have not yet explored. What connection? The French archaeologist, Professor Hercule Beaumont. He claims to be searching for Byzantine relics. Both Andropolis and Sir Reginald were involved in the theft of such relics, and yet we have not spoken with him. Ahmed nodded grimly. His room is on this floor, 412. Then let us pay the professor a visit. Poirot turned from the window, his face determined. But first, arrange for guards outside every room. If the killer is targeting those connected to stolen Byzantine treasures, then everyone on this floor may be in danger. Including us. Poirot smiled grimly. The serpent does not strike those who seek to help it. But we must be cautious nonetheless. In this hotel of shadows, no one is truly safe. They departed the blood-soaked room, leaving behind the unconscious Andropolis and the terrible message upon the wall. But as they walked towards Professor Beaumont's suite, neither man noticed the figure watching from the stairwell, a figure in black, whose eyes were indeed the color of frozen ice. The serpent was watching, and the night was still young. Chapter 7. The archaeologist's secret room, 412, stood silent as a tomb. Poirot knocked 3 times, sharp, precise raps that echoed through the corridor with military efficiency. No response came from within. Professor Beaumont, Ahmed called, his hand moving instinctively towards the revolver at his hip. Istanbul police, we must speak with you. Silence. The 2 men exchanged troubled glances. After the violence they had just witnessed in Andropolis's suite, an unanswered door carried ominous implications. Fetch the manager, Poirot instructed quietly. We require the master key. But before Ahmed could move, a sound emerged from behind the door, the scraping of a chair, the shuffle of footsteps, and finally the click of a turning lock. The door opened to reveal a man who appeared to have recently emerged from a nightmare. Professor Hercule Beaumont was perhaps 50 years of age, with the weathered complexion of one who had spent decades beneath harsh Mediterranean suns. His grey beard was unkempt, his spectacles sat crookedly upon his nose, and his tweed jacket bore fresh stains of what appeared to be red wine, or something more sinister. But it was his eyes that arrested Poirot's attention. They were blue, pale, piercing blue, the color of winter ice upon the Bosphorus. Monsieur Poirot, the professor said, his French accent thick with exhaustion. I wondered when you would come. Please, enter quickly. The walls in this hotel have ears. The suite was a scholar's chaos. Books lay open upon every surface, ancient texts in Greek, Latin, Arabic, and languages Poirot did not recognize. Maps of Constantinople adorned the walls, marked with symbols and notations in colored ink. Fragments of pottery and stone tablets cluttered the desk, alongside magnifying glasses, brushes, and tools of archaeological excavation. But dominating the room was a single, large canvas upon which Professor Beaumont had sketched an elaborate diagram. At its center was the now familiar symbol, the Byzantine serpent, the Ouroboros, encircling the Orthodox cross. "You are studying the Brotherhood," Poirot observed, his eyes sweeping the academic disorder. "I'm hunting them." Beaumont closed the door and secured 3 separate locks, including one that appeared to be of recent installation. "For 15 years, I've tracked the Byzantine serpent across Europe and the Middle East. They are not myth, Monsieur Poirot. They are terrifyingly real." Ahmed stepped forward, his expression stern. "Professor, a man was just attacked in this hotel. Another was murdered 3 days ago. Both bore the symbol of this brotherhood. I must ask, where were you during these incidents?" Beaumont laughed bitterly. "Where was I? Here, barricaded in this room like a prisoner, eating meals delivered to my door, sleeping with a loaded pistol beneath my pillow." He gestured towards the nightstand, where indeed a revolver lay within easy reach. "I am not the hunter anymore, gentlemen. I have become the prey." "Explain," Poirot commanded, settling into the room's only uncluttered chair. The professor removed his spectacles and rubbed his weary eyes. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of accumulated years and accumulated sins. "I was not always a scholar, Monsieur Poirot. In my youth, I was an adventurer, a treasure hunter, if we are being honest. I traveled with wealthy patrons who desired Byzantine antiquities for their private collections. I found these treasures for them. I did not ask how they were acquired or what became of those who had protected them. You were a thief. I was a fool who believed that ancient objects belonged in museums and private galleries rather than crumbling churches and forgotten monasteries." Beaumont poured himself a glass of wine with trembling hands. 20 years ago, I led an expedition to a remote monastery in Cappadocia. We sought the chalice of Theodora, a sacred cup supposedly used by the Empress herself during the coronation of Justinian. "You found it?" "We found it, hidden in a chamber beneath the monastery, guarded by monks who had dedicated their lives to its protection." The professor's voice fell to a whisper. "There was violence. The monks resisted. My patrons' hired men were not gentle in their persuasion. When we left that place, the chalice was in our possession, and 3 monks lay dead upon the stones." Poirot's expression remained neutral, but his eyes had grown cold. "And your patrons?" "Count Friedrich von Hartmann financed the expedition. Sir Reginald Blackwood provided diplomatic cover through his position at the British Embassy. Dimitrios Andropoulos arranged transportation of the stolen goods. And I—" Beaumont drained his wine in a single swallow. "I provided the expertise that made it all possible. 4 conspirators in sacrilege and murder. 5. The professor met Poirot's gaze steadily. "There was another. A young woman who served as translator and guide. She was Greek, from a family with ancient connections to the Byzantine Church. She claimed to sympathize with our mission, but she was Brotherhood. I did not know it then. She was beautiful, brilliant, utterly convincing in her performance. She helped us locate the monastery, identified the chalice's hiding place, and then disappeared on the night of our departure. I never saw her again." Poirot leaned forward intently. "This woman, describe her." "She was young then, perhaps 25. Dark hair, olive complexion, eyes of unusual color, gray, almost silver in certain light. She called herself Elena." Elena Vasilikos, Ahmed breathed. The Countess. Beaumont nodded slowly. I did not recognize her at first. 20 years change a person. But 3 days ago, I saw her in the hotel dining room, and those eyes I could never forget. She looked directly at me and smiled. A smile that promised death. Poirot rose abruptly and began pacing the cluttered room. So we have our connection. Sir Reginald, Count von Hartmann, Andropolis, and you, all participated in the theft of the chalice of Theodora. The Count is already dead, having perished 3 years ago in Vienna. Sir Reginald has been murdered. Andropolis lies wounded, and you remain barricaded in your room, awaiting your fate. I will not simply wait. Beaumont opened a desk drawer and produced a leather journal, its pages yellowed with age. I have spent 15 years researching the Brotherhood, their history, their methods, their weaknesses. This journal contains everything I have learned. Poirot accepted the journal with reverent care. Why have you not fled Istanbul? Because fleeing is pointless. The Brotherhood's reach extends across continents. I ran for 15 years, Monsieur Poirot. Changing names, changing countries, never staying in one place longer than a few months. They always found me. They have agents everywhere. Hotel clerks, taxi drivers, customs officials. There is no escape from the serpent. Then why come here? Why place yourself in the very hotel where your former conspirators have gathered? Beaumont's expression shifted to grim determination. Because I am tired of running, because the only way to end this hunt is to confront the hunters. And because... He hesitated, glancing towards the locked door. Because I have something they want. Something more valuable than my life. The chalice of Theodora. No. Something far more precious to the Brotherhood. The professor moved to his bed and lifted the mattress, revealing a hidden compartment. From within, he extracted a small wooden box, ancient and ornately carved. This is the Codex Serpentis, the original charter of the Byzantine serpent, written in the year 1453, on the eve of Constantinople's fall. It contains the names of every Grand Master who has ever led the Brotherhood, their secret rituals, and most importantly, Poirot prompted, the location of the Brotherhood's greatest treasure, a vault hidden beneath the streets of Istanbul, containing relics accumulated over 5 centuries, crowns of emperors, bones of saints, manuscripts lost to history. Beaumont's eyes gleamed with something between fear and wonder. I stole this codex from a dealer in Alexandria 10 years ago. Since then, the Brotherhood has hunted me without mercy. Ahmed stepped forward. We should take this into protective custody. No. Beaumont clutched the box protectively. This is my only bargaining chip, the only thing keeping me alive. If the Brotherhood believes I will reveal the vault's location to the authorities, they will destroy me immediately. But as long as they hope to recover the codex through negotiation or coercion, I have value. Poirot studied the professor with penetrating intensity. You speak of bargaining. What do you offer in return for your life? Beaumont swallowed hard. I will give them the codex. I will lead them to the vault. I will do whatever they ask. But first, they must guarantee my safety and allow me to leave Istanbul alive. You would betray the location of priceless Byzantine relics to murderers. I would betray anything to survive, Monsieur Poirot. I'm not a brave man. I'm merely a man who wishes to see another sunrise. Poirot turned away, his expression unreadable. Through the window, the sun was setting over Istanbul, painting the ancient city in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere out there, among the minarets and the ruins, a serpent coiled, waiting to strike. Professor, Poirot said finally, you mentioned that the young Elena disappeared on the night you departed with the chalice. What happened to the stolen artifact itself? Beaumont frowned at the apparent change of subject. The chalice. It was delivered to Count von Hartmann's estate in Austria. As far as I know, it remained there until his death. And afterward. The Count's widow, the Countess, inherited everything, including the chalice. Poirot's eyes widened with sudden understanding. Mon Dieu. She has been recovering the stolen relics. The Count's collection was built upon Byzantine plunder. When he died, Elena, now Countess von Hartmann, gained access to everything he had stolen. She has been returning these treasures to the Brotherhood. Then why continue killing? Ahmed asked. If she has the chalice, why murder Blackwood and attack Andropolis? Because the murder was never about the relics alone. Poirot turned from the window, his face grave. It is about justice, punishment. The 3 monks who died in Cappadocia, they must be avenged. The Brotherhood does not merely recover stolen property, they execute those responsible for its theft. Beaumont had gone deathly pale. Then I am next. Unless we can stop the Countess before she strikes again. Poirot moved towards the door. Professor, you will remain in this room. Do not open the door for anyone except myself or Inspector Osman. Keep your pistol close. Where are you going? Poirot's mustache twitched with grim determination. To confront a serpent in her lair, the Countess von Hartmann has hidden behind her mask of aristocratic grief long enough. Tonight we shall see what lies beneath. He paused at the threshold, turning back with one final question. Professor, you said Elena had grey eyes, almost silver, but the man Andropolis, before he lost consciousness, described his attacker's eyes as blue. Ice blue. How do you explain this discrepancy? Beaumont shook his head slowly. I cannot. Unless what? Unless there are 2 of them. The Brotherhood always works in pairs, the hand and the shadow. One executes, the other observes. If Elena is the shadow. Fear crept across the professor's face. Then somewhere in this hotel, there is another agent, one we have not yet identified. Poirot and Ahmed exchanged troubled glances. The ice-blue eyes, Ahmed murmured. We must discover who else in this hotel possesses such eyes. Indeed. Poirot opened the door, surveying the corridor with newfound suspicion. The serpent has 2 heads, Ahmed, and until we identify both, no one in the Pera Palace is safe. They departed into the shadows of the 4th floor, leaving Professor Beaumont alone with his stolen codex and his loaded pistol. Neither would prove sufficient protection against what was coming. Chapter 8. The serpent-revealed night had fallen upon Istanbul like a velvet shroud. The Pera Palace Hotel stood silent beneath a canopy of stars, its grand facade illuminated by flickering gas lamps that cast dancing shadows upon ancient stones. The call to prayer had long since faded, replaced by the distant sounds of the city. Sailors singing in waterfront taverns, the clatter of late carriages upon cobblestones, the eternal whisper of the Bosphorus. Poirot stood before the door of room 305, the Countess von Hartmann's suite, composing himself with characteristic precision. Ahmed waited beside him, his hand resting upon his holstered revolver. You are certain about this confrontation? Ahmed asked quietly. We have no concrete evidence, only suspicion and coincidence. Sometimes, my friend, the direct approach yields the greatest results. The Countess believes herself untouchable, protected by her aristocratic mask and her Brotherhood's shadows. Tonight, we shall shake that confidence. Poirot knocked firmly. For a long moment, silence answered. Then soft footsteps approached, and the door opened to reveal Countess Elise von Hartmann in an evening gown of midnight blue. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears, and her silver hair was arranged with elaborate elegance. She appeared dressed for a ball rather than an interrogation. Monsieur Poirot, Inspector. Her smile was gracious, her grey eyes betraying nothing. An unexpected pleasure. Please do come in. The Countess's suite was a study in refined luxury. Persian carpets covered the floors, silk tapestries adorned the walls, Fresh flowers perfumed the air with jasmine and rose. A fire crackled in the marble fireplace, casting warm light upon furniture that belonged in a Viennese palace. But Poirot's attention was captured by the objects displayed upon the mantelpiece. Small icons painted on ancient wood, golden crosses set with precious stones, fragments of illuminated manuscripts preserved behind glass. Byzantine treasures. Stolen relics returned to their rightful guardian. "You admire my collection," the Countess observed, pouring wine into crystal glasses without asking if her guests desired refreshment. "My late husband was passionate about Byzantine art. These pieces were his greatest loves, and now they are yours. Everything that was his became mine upon his death. Such is the nature of marriage." She offered them the glasses with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Please sit. Tell me how I may assist your investigation." Poirot accepted the wine, but did not drink. He settled into an armchair, his posture deceptively relaxed, his gaze sharp as surgical steel. "Countess, or should I say, Mademoiselle Vasilikos, let us dispense with pretense. I know who you are. I know what you have done, and I know why." The words hung in the air like smoke. The Countess remained perfectly still for 3 heartbeats. Then, slowly, she lowered herself onto the chaise longue across from Poirot, her expression shifting from aristocratic politeness to something far more dangerous. "So, the little Belgian detective has been doing his research." Her accent had changed, the German formality replaced by something softer, more Mediterranean. "I wondered how long my mask would endure. 20 years is a considerable achievement. You infiltrated the Count's household, married him, inherited his stolen collection, and systematically returned the treasures to their rightful homes, all while hunting the men responsible for the Cappadocian massacre. They were not merely thieves, Monsieur Poirot. They were murderers. Brother Alexios, Brother Dimitri, Brother Konstantinos. They died protecting the chalice of Theodora. They died because Blackwood, Andropolis, Beaumont, and my husband valued gold over human life." Elena's grey eyes blazed with cold fire. "The Brotherhood remembers. The Brotherhood avenges." Ahmed stepped forward. "You admit to killing Sir Reginald Blackwood." "I admit nothing." The dangerous smile returned. "I am merely explaining motivation, Inspector. Understanding why someone might wish these men dead is not the same as confessing to their deaths. The symbol carved upon Blackwood's chest, the Byzantine serpent, it is the mark of your Brotherhood. Many know that symbol. It appears in history books and museum catalogues. Any student of Byzantine culture could reproduce it." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but relentless. "The silk thread found beside Sir Reginald's bed, crimson of exceptional quality. It matches the weave of robes worn by Brotherhood initiates during their secret ceremonies. I have seen samples in Professor Beaumont's research." For the first time, something flickered in Elena's composure. Uncertainty. "The professor has shared his findings with you?" "He has shared many things, including the existence of the Codex Serpentis, the original charter of your order, which he stole from Alexandria 10 years ago." Elena rose abruptly, moving to the window with the fluid grace of a hunting cat. Outside, the lights of Istanbul glittered like scattered jewels. "The Codex," she murmured. "So that is why he came to this hotel, not merely to confront his past, but to bargain for his future. He believes it is his only protection against your Brotherhood's justice. He is correct." Elena turned, and now her mask had fallen entirely. Before them stood not a countess, but a warrior, ancient, implacable, utterly committed to her cause. "The Codex contains our most sacred secrets. Its recovery is essential to our survival. As long as Beaumont possesses it, we cannot act openly against him." And yet someone attacked Andropolis. Someone carved the number 2 upon his wall in blood. Elena's expression shifted to genuine puzzlement. "That was not my work." Ahmed scoffed. You expect us to believe. I expect you to listen, Inspector. Elena's voice cracked like a whip. I did not attack Dimitrios Andropoulos. I had no reason to. Not yet. He was third upon my list, not second, and the manner of attack was entirely wrong. Too public, too messy, too theatrical. Poirot's grey cells sparked with sudden electricity. Third upon your list. Then who was second? My husband was second. Friedrich died 3 years ago in Vienna, officially of heart failure. The Brotherhood knows differently. Elena smiled coldly. His death was peaceful, painless. He deserved far worse, but I granted him mercy for the years of access he provided to his stolen collection. Then Sir Reginald was first. Blackwood was the architect of the Cappadocian massacre. He recruited the others, planned the expedition, ordered the violence when the monks resisted. He was always first. Poirot rose slowly, his mind racing through implications. If you killed Sir Reginald, but did not attack Andropoulos, then there is another killer in this hotel. Someone who knows the Brotherhood symbols. Someone who is either imitating your methods or is Brotherhood themselves. Elena completed the thought, her eyes widening with realization. A faction I do not control, a serpent within the serpent. The eyes, Ahmed interjected. Andropoulos described his attacker's eyes as ice blue. Yours are grey. Elena nodded slowly. There is only one person in this hotel with such eyes. One person who knows our secrets. One person who has reason to strike against these men independently of my orders. Who? Before Elena could answer, a sound shattered the night. A gunshot, followed by a scream echoing from somewhere above. The 4th floor. Beaumont! Ahmed was already running for the door. Poirot followed, but paused at the threshold, turning back to the Countess. Come with us. If there is truly another serpent in this nest, we may need your knowledge to stop them. Elena hesitated only a moment before gathering her skirts and joining them. The Codex, she said as they raced toward the staircase. If the professor dies before revealing its location, then your Brotherhood's greatest secret dies with him. They climbed the stairs, 3 at a time, their footsteps thundering through the silent hotel. Other guests emerged from their rooms, the Russian princess clutching her furs, the American honeymooners wide-eyed with terror, staff members shouting in Turkish and Greek. The 4th floor corridor was chaos. The door to room 412 stood open, splintered by tremendous force. Smoke drifted from within, carrying the acrid scent of gunpowder. And sprawled across the threshold, his academic tweed soaked with blood, lay Professor Henri Beaumont. The pistol remained clutched in his dead fingers. Mon Dieu, Poirot breathed, kneeling beside the fallen scholar. Beaumont had been shot twice, once in the chest, once in the head. The execution was clinical, precise, utterly without mercy. His spectacles lay shattered beside him, and his eyes stared sightlessly at the ornate ceiling. The wooden box containing the Codex Serpentis was gone. He fired, Ahmed observed, examining the professor's weapon. 2 shots discharged, he fought back. But against whom? Poirot rose, surveying the devastated room. The struggle had been brief but violent, furniture overturned, books scattered, the window curtain torn from its rod. And there, upon the wall opposite the fireplace, a new message had been scrawled in blood. 3. The Count continues, Elena murmured, her face pale beneath its Mediterranean complexion. But this is not my work. I swear upon the bones of the martyrs. Poirot moved to the window, which stood open despite the cold night air. Below, a narrow ledge ran along the building's facade, barely wide enough for a human foot, but navigable by someone with skill and desperation. The killer escaped this way, along the ledge to another room, or perhaps to the roof. He turned back to the carnage. Ahmed, secure the building. No one enters or leaves until every guest and staff member has been accounted for. At once. Ahmed barked orders to the arriving police officers, who began spreading throughout the hotel. Poirot approached Elena, his voice low and urgent. "You said there was one person in this hotel with ice-blue eyes. One person who knows Brotherhood secrets." "Who?" Elena's gaze drifted to the bloody message upon the wall. "Someone I helped create. Someone I trained in our ways, shared our knowledge with, trusted with our mission. A name, Countess. I need a name." Elena met his eyes, and for the first time Poirot saw genuine fear in their grey depths. "Lady Cordelia Blackwood. She came to me 6 months ago, claiming she wished to expose her husband's crimes. I believed her. I told her about the Brotherhood, about our history, about our methods of justice. I even showed her how we mark our victims." "You trained the wife of your intended target?" "I thought she wanted revenge. I thought she was an ally." Elena's voice trembled with bitter realization. "But she was using me, using the Brotherhood's symbols to cover her own murders." "Her own murders? For what purpose?" "The inheritance, Monsieur Poirot. Sir Reginald's fortune. Andropolis was her husband's business partner. He knew about hidden accounts, secret investments. Beaumont possessed information that could expose Blackwood's wartime crimes and potentially void his estate." Elena laughed bitterly. She eliminated everyone who could threaten her claim to his wealth, and she made it appear as ancient vengeance. Poirot's mustache twitched with grim understanding. The perfect deception. Kill her husband, silence his associates, and blame a shadowy Byzantine cult that few believe exists. And I gave her the knowledge to do it. I sharpened the blade that is now cutting us all." Ahmed returned, his face grim. "Lady Blackwood is not in her suite. Her bed has not been slept in, and her maid reports that she departed 2 hours ago, dressed in dark clothing, claiming she needed fresh air." "The window ledge," Poirot said. "It connects several rooms on this floor. She could have entered Beaumont's suite from outside, killed him, taken the codex, and escaped the same way." "But where would she go?" Elena's eyes widened suddenly. "The vault, the Brotherhood's vault. Its location is recorded in the codex. If Cordelia has the book, she will try to access the treasure." "Can she read the ancient Greek?" "I taught her." Elena's voice was hollow with self-recrimination. "God help me, I taught her everything." Poirot seized her arm. "Then you must take us there, now, before she escapes with 5 centuries of irreplaceable relics. The vault has remained hidden for 500 years. If I reveal its location to the authorities, if you do not, a murderess will plunder your Brotherhood's greatest legacy and disappear forever. The choice, Countess, is yours." Elena stood frozen for a long moment, torn between sacred duty and practical necessity. Finally, she nodded once. A sharp, decisive gesture. "Follow me, and pray we are not too late." They plunged into the Istanbul night, leaving behind the blood-soaked hotel and its terrified guests. Somewhere in the ancient city, beneath streets that had witnessed the fall of empires, a treasure waited, and a killer raced to claim it. Chapter 9. The Vault of Emperors. The streets of old Istanbul swallowed them like a labyrinth of shadows. Elena led them through narrow passages that twisted between ancient walls, past shuttered shops and sleeping mosques, beneath archways that had witnessed the march of Roman legions and Ottoman sultans alike. The cobblestones were slick with evening mist, and the only light came from flickering oil lamps mounted upon crumbling facades. "Where are we going?" Ahmed demanded, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. "The Sultanahmet district, beneath the ruins of the great palace of Constantinople." Elena moved with the certainty of one who had walked these paths many times before. When the city fell in 1453, the Brotherhood sealed their most precious treasures in chambers beneath the palace foundations. The entrance has remained hidden for 5 centuries. Poirot struggled to keep pace, his patent leather shoes unsuited for such terrain. Yet his grey cells worked furiously, assembling the pieces of this elaborate puzzle. "Lady Blackwood," he said between breaths. "She approached you 6 months ago, but her husband did not arrive in Istanbul until 3 weeks passed. How did she know he would come here?" Elena glanced back, her grey eyes glinting in the lamplight. She claimed to have intercepted correspondence between Reginald and the British Embassy. She knew his schedule months in advance. And she used that time to plan, to prepare, to seduce you into revealing Brotherhood secrets. Poirot shook his head with grudging admiration. A most patient and calculating murderess. "I underestimated her. I saw only a woman wronged by a cruel husband. I did not see the serpent beneath." There is a certain irony, no? The Brotherhood of the Byzantine Serpent, deceived by a serpent of English breeding. They emerged from the narrow passages into a vast open space, the ancient hippodrome, where Byzantine emperors had once watched chariot races and celebrated triumphs. Now it stood empty beneath the stars, its monuments casting long shadows across the desolate ground. There. Elena pointed toward a small structure at the hippodrome's edge, a stone building that appeared to be an abandoned cistern entrance. "The vault lies beneath." Ahmed drew his revolver. "I should summon reinforcements." "There is no time. If Cordelia reaches the treasure before us, she will disappear into the night. The vault has multiple exits, passages that lead to the waterfront, to the old Byzantine walls, even to the cellars of the Hagia Sophia. Once she enters, we may never find her again." They approached the structure cautiously. The ancient door stood ajar, its iron surface scarred by recent tool marks. Someone had forced entry within the past hour. "She is in sight," Poirot murmured. "Come, but carefully. A cornered serpent is most dangerous." Stone steps descended into darkness. Elena produced a small electric torch, a modern convenience that seemed almost sacrilegious in this ancient place, and led them downward. The stairs were worn smooth by countless feet over countless centuries, and the walls bore faded frescoes depicting saints and emperors long forgotten by history. The air grew cold and damp as they descended. Poirot counted the steps, 50, 100, 150, until finally the staircase opened into a vast underground chamber, the vault of the Byzantine Serpent. Even Poirot, who had witnessed many extraordinary sights in his distinguished career, could not suppress a gasp of wonder. The chamber stretched into shadow, its vaulted ceiling supported by columns of green marble veined with gold. Alcoves lined the walls, each containing treasures that would make museum curators weep with envy. Golden crowns set with rubies and sapphires, jeweled crosses that had adorned the altars of Constantinople's greatest churches, illuminated manuscripts whose pages glowed with centuries-old pigments, and dominating the chamber's center, upon a pedestal of pure white marble, stood a chalice of extraordinary beauty. The chalice of Theodora. It was smaller than Poirot had imagined, perhaps 8 inches in height, but its craftsmanship was beyond description. Gold and silver intertwined in patterns that seemed almost alive, and at its base 12 apostles were carved in miniature perfection. Standing before the chalice, her back to them, was Lady Cordelia Blackwood. She had changed from her mourning black into practical clothing, dark trousers, a fitted jacket, sturdy boots. Her wheat blonde hair was bound beneath a cap, and in her hands she clutched the wooden box containing the Codex Serpentis. "So beautiful," she murmured, not turning around. I'd read about it, of course. Elena described it so vividly, but to see it in person— Lady Blackwood. Poirot stepped forward, his voice echoing through the ancient chamber. "It is finished. There is nowhere left to run." Cordelia turned slowly. Her grey eyes— no, Poirot realized with sudden clarity, they were not grey at all. They were pale blue, the color of winter ice. She had worn tinted spectacles during their previous meetings, subtle enough to escape notice, sufficient to disguise her most distinctive feature. Monsieur Poirot, Inspector Osman, and dear Elena, my teacher, my mentor, my unwitting accomplice. Cordelia smiled, and there was no pretense of grief or fragility now, only cold, calculating intelligence. You found the vault faster than I anticipated. I'm impressed. You killed your husband, Ahmed said, his revolver trained upon her. You attacked Andropolis. You murdered Professor Beaumont. Guilty as charged. Cordelia shrugged with theatrical indifference. Reginald was a monster who deserved far worse than a clean death. Andropolis knew too much about our finances. He would have contested the inheritance. And Beaumont, she hefted the codex casually. The professor had something I needed. The location of this vault. Precisely. Elena told me about the Brotherhood's treasure, but she would never reveal its location. Professional ethics, she claimed. Sacred duty to her order. Cordelia laughed coldly. So I found someone who was willing to trade. A frightened old man who valued his life more than ancient secrets. And the symbols? Poirot asked. The Byzantine serpent carved upon your husband's chest? The bloody numbers upon the walls? Misdirection. Elena had explained the Brotherhood's methods so thoroughly. Their symbols, their rituals, their ancient vendetta against those who had desecrated Byzantine treasures. It was the perfect cover. Kill Reginald and his associates, make it appear as cult vengeance, disappear with both his fortune and the greatest archaeological discovery of the century. Elena stepped forward, her face twisted with fury. You used me. You befriended me, earned my trust, manipulated my desire for justice. Your desire for justice? Cordelia's eyes flashed with sudden anger. You murdered my husband, Elena. Yes, he was a monster. Yes, he deserved punishment, but he was still my husband. My property, my tool, my path to wealth and freedom. You had no right to take him from me before I was ready. I do not understand, Poirot interjected, his grey cells working rapidly. If Elena killed Sir Reginald, then why have you confessed to the crime? Cordelia's smile returned, sharp as a blade. Because technically, we both killed him. Elena administered the chloral hydrate. She had arranged for a waiter to add it to Reginald's evening whiskey. She entered the room through means I still do not understand, carved her precious symbol upon his chest, and departed believing her sacred vengeance was complete. The impossible locked room, Ahmed breathed. Elena's face had gone pale. There is a passage, a hidden tunnel connecting several rooms on the 4th floor, built during the hotel's construction to allow Ottoman intelligence officers to move unseen. I discovered it years ago, during my research into Byzantine-era buildings. Reginald's room had access. So Elena entered through the secret passage, carved the symbol, and left him dying, but not yet dead. Cordelia continued her explanation with obvious pleasure. But the chloral hydrate was not sufficient to kill a man of Reginald's constitution. It merely rendered him unconscious and helpless. So I finished what Elena started. You cut his throat. Clean, quick, merciful. More merciful than he deserved. Cordelia's eyes grew distant with memory. Then I secured the room from within, exited through the same passage Elena had used, and returned to my own suite. The perfect locked room mystery. Because 2 killers had entered, each believing they acted alone. Poirot nodded slowly, the final pieces of his puzzle clicking into place. You waited until Elena had departed before completing the murder. You knew about her plans because I had followed her for weeks. I knew about the hidden passage, about the drugged whiskey, about everything. I simply allowed her to do the difficult work while I waited in shadow. Cordelia began moving slowly along the chamber's edge, putting distance between herself and Ahmed's revolver. 2 serpents in one nest, Monsieur Poirot, each using the other. And Andropolis? Beaumont? Entirely my own work. Andropolis was supposed to die, but the man fought back with unexpected vigor. Beaumont was easier. He was so focused on defending himself against Elena's brotherhood that he never saw the real threat coming. The ice-blue eyes, Poirot murmured. Andropolis saw your true eye color during the struggle. That was your mistake. Everyone makes mistakes, Monsieur Poirot, even the famous Hercule Poirot. Cordelia had reached a shadowed alcove at the chamber's far end. The question is whether you can learn from them. Her hand moved with lightning speed, pulling a lever hidden within the alcove. Ancient mechanisms groaned to life, and suddenly the chamber began to shake. Dust cascaded from the vaulted ceiling. Cracks appeared in the marble floor. "The vault has safeguards," Cordelia shouted over the growing rumble. "Designed to destroy the treasure rather than let it fall into enemy hands. In 5 minutes, this entire chamber will collapse, burying you, the Brotherhood's relics, and all evidence of my crimes." She darted toward a narrow passage that had opened in the wall, one of the escape routes Elena had mentioned. "Stop her!" Ahmed fired, but Cordelia had already vanished into the darkness. Poirot seized Elena's arm. "The safeguards, can they be stopped?" "Perhaps. There is a counterweight system. If we can reach the mechanism before—" A tremendous crash interrupted her. A section of ceiling collapsed mere meters away, sending ancient treasures tumbling into rubble. The chalice of Theodora wobbled upon its pedestal, and without thinking, Poirot lunged forward to catch it before it fell. "The chalice is not worth your life," Ahmed shouted. "Everything in this chamber is worth preserving." Elena was already running towards a bronze wheel mounted upon the far wall. "Help me turn this. If we can release the counterweight before the main supports fail." Ahmed holstered his revolver and joined her, muscles straining against centuries of rust and neglect. Slowly, grudgingly, the wheel began to turn. The rumbling subsided. The falling debris ceased. The ancient vault groaned, but held. Poirot clutched the chalice of Theodora against his chest, his heart pounding with uncharacteristic violence. "The mechanism is stopped?" "Temporarily." Elena sagged against the wall, exhausted. "But Cordelia has escaped, with the codex, with the knowledge to find other Brotherhood treasures across Europe and the Middle East. Then we must pursue—" "No." Ahmed placed a restraining hand upon Poirot's shoulder. "The passages are too dangerous. We do not know where they lead or what other traps await. Lady Blackwood has escaped. For now." Poirot's mustache twitched with frustration. The detective in him rebelled against allowing a murderer to flee. But the pragmatist recognized the truth in Ahmed's words. "She will surface eventually," Elena said quietly. "Women like Cordelia cannot resist the lure of wealth and treasure. She will make a mistake. She will be found." Perhaps. Poirot gazed around the ancient chamber, at the treasures that had survived 5 centuries of secrecy, at the relics that represented the faith and artistry of a fallen civilization. But tonight, at least, these wonders are preserved. The Brotherhood's legacy endures. Elena met his eyes, and something passed between them. Respect, perhaps, or understanding. "The legacy endures," she repeated softly, "and justice, though delayed, is never denied." Epilogue, 3 months later. London. The telegram arrived on a grey February morning, finding Hercule Poirot in his customary armchair at Whitehaven Mansions. He opened it with careful fingers and read, "Poirot, stop, Lady Cordelia. Blackwood apprehended in Alexandria. Stop attempting to sell Byzantine relics to private collector. Stop Codex Serpentis recovered. Stop Brotherhood extends gratitude. Stop justice served. Stop." Elena Poirot smiled, smoothing his moustache with satisfaction. "George," he called to his valet, "prepare my morning tisane, and add perhaps a small measure of honey. Today, I believe, calls for celebration." "Good news, sir." "The best news, George. A serpent has been caught in her own coils." He folded the telegram carefully and placed it in his breast pocket. "The case of the Istanbul incident is finally, completely closed. Outside, the London rain continued to fall, but in Poirot's heart, the sun was shining, as it always did when order was restored, when justice prevailed, and when the little grey cells proved once again that no mystery, however impossible, could resist the powers of Hercule Poirot.